A rich husband flirts with his mistress, but when his pregnant wife quietly leaves, he panics. The plastic stick trembled in Mireya Elizabeth Mitchell's hands as two pink lines stared back at her, bold and undeniable. She blinked hard, her green eyes watering from the fluorescent bathroom light, hoping the lines might blur away like a cruel mirage, but they remained, stubborn as her racing heartbeat. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ventilation fan. The pregnancy test slipped from her fingers, clattering against the white tile floor of their downtown Seattle condo. Mireya stared at her reflection in the mirror, 32 years old, pale skin flushed with shock, chestnut hair pulled back in her signature practical bun that never seemed to stay perfectly in place. Her blazer hung wrinkled on the door hook, evidence of another grueling day at the architectural firm where she spent more time managing anxiety than designing buildings. She pressed her palm against her flat stomach, trying to imagine the tiny life growing inside. A baby, their baby. The thought should have filled her with joy, but instead, a familiar knot of dread twisted in her chest. When had she and Silas last had a real conversation? Not the perfunctory "how was your day" exchanges while he scrolled through his phone, but actual words that mattered. She couldn't remember. The bathroom door rattled as someone knocked. "Mireya, you okay in there?" Silas's voice carried that familiar edge of impatience, the same tone he used during conference calls that ran too long. She quickly scooped up the pregnancy test, wrapping it in tissue and shoving it into her blazer pocket. "Just a minute." Her hands shook as she splashed cold water on her face, watching droplets cling to her eyelashes. In the mirror, she looked exactly like what she was, a woman drowning in her own life, struggling to keep her head above water, while everyone around her assumed she had it all together. The apartment felt suffocating as she emerged from the bathroom. Silas stood in their sleek kitchen, his 6'1" frame commanding even in casual clothes, thumbs flying across his phone screen. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite it being nearly 9 p.m., and his Apple Watch gleamed under the pendant lights. Even at home, he looked like a magazine ad for successful executives. "Finally," he muttered without looking up. "I've been waiting to tell you about the Morrison deal. 3 more companies are interested, and if we close by Friday—" "Silas." Her voice came out smaller than intended. "We're talking about a promotion that could change everything. Johnson practically guaranteed me the VP position if—" "Silas, please." He finally glanced up, his blue eyes reflecting mild annoyance. "What's wrong? You look pale." The words sat heavy on her tongue. "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. Everything is about to change." But looking at him, really looking, she saw a stranger. When had the man she married become this polished, distant figure who measured success in stock options and corner offices? I need to talk to you about something important." Silas's phone buzzed. His eyes immediately flicked to the screen, and Mireya watched his expression shift to that familiar look of barely contained excitement he reserved for work notifications. "Can it wait? Kelly just sent the preliminary numbers for next quarter and—" "Kelly?" The name escaped before she could stop it. "The new intern. Brilliant girl. Really gets the big picture." His fingers were already moving across the screen again. "You'd like her. She's got this incredible energy, you know. Always thinking 3 steps ahead." Something cold settled in Mireya's stomach. She'd heard that name before. Whispered in phone calls Silas took in another room. Mentioned casually in conversations that stopped when she entered the room. "How long have you been working with her?" "A few weeks. Why?" But he was typing again, completely absorbed in whatever Kelly had sent. Mireya stood there, pregnancy test burning like a secret in her pocket, watching her husband fall in love with someone else's enthusiasm. The baby growing inside her deserved better than this. She deserved better than this. "Never mind," she whispered. Silas grunted acknowledgement, already moving toward his home office. "I need to respond to this. The investors are expecting." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Mireya alone in their gleaming kitchen that felt more like a showroom than a home. She pulled out her phone and opened her Trello board. Life organization, with color-coded lists for everything from grocery shopping to anxiety management techniques. Her fingers hovered over the screen, ready to create yet another task list, another system to control the uncontrollable. Instead, she opened her notes app and typed, "Baby due approximately February." Below that, after a long pause, "Tell Silas when he's not busy." She stared at the words, knowing that when he's not busy might never come. Outside their floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline glittered with promise and possibility. But inside their perfect condo, with its designer furniture and carefully curated art, Mireia had never felt more alone. The pregnancy test seemed to pulse against her leg through the fabric of her pocket, a tiny plastic prophet of change. Whether that change would save or destroy her marriage remained to be seen. 3 days had passed since the pregnancy test, and Mireia still hadn't found the right moment to tell Silas. Every morning she practiced the words in front of the bathroom mirror while organizing her colored pens by gradient, a nervous habit that had intensified since discovering the baby. "Silas, we need to talk. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." But each evening he came home later, his fingers already dancing across his phone screen before he even removed his jacket. "Sorry, babe," he'd mutter, not bothering to look up. "Big presentation tomorrow. Kelly's been incredible with the research." Kelly. Always Kelly. Mireia found herself opening Instagram more frequently, her thumb scrolling compulsively through posts until she found the account that made her stomach clench. Lennox M. Hayes. The profile picture showed a stunning young woman with flowing black hair and confident brown eyes, lips curved in a smile that promised trouble. "Living my best life. Boss life. Never settle." The latest post was a mirror selfie taken in what looked like an expensive restaurant bathroom. Lennox wore a form-fitting black dress that Mireia could never pull off, her curves accentuated by strategic poses she'd clearly practiced. The caption read, "When your mentor takes you to celebrate closing the Morrison deal. So grateful for amazing leaders who believe in lifting others up." Mireia's green eyes stared at the timestamp. 8:47 p.m. Last night. The same night Silas had texted her that he was stuck in back-to-back client calls. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, where morning sickness had started making its presence known with waves of nausea that struck at unpredictable moments. She'd been carrying crackers in her blazer pocket, sneaking them during meetings when the queasiness threatened to overwhelm her. "Mrs. Mitchell," her assistant's voice broke through her spiral. "The Westfield clients are here for their 2 p.m. consultation." Mireia quickly closed Instagram, her cheeks burning with embarrassment at being caught stalking her husband's intern. She smoothed her hair, ensuring every strand was secure in its bun, and grabbed her iPad where she kept all her architectural sketches organized in digital folders. The meeting dragged on, but Mireia found herself doodling absently in the margins of her notes. Tiny houses with picket fences, nursery layouts, family rooms filled with toys. When Mr. Westfield asked about timeline flexibility, she almost blurted out that she'd need maternity leave in 8 months. After the clients left, Mireia sat alone in her office, staring at her sketches. These weren't the sleek, modern designs her firm was known for. These were homes, warm, lived-in spaces where families grew and loved and built memories together. Her phone buzzed. A text from Silas. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Below that, a second message. "Kelly's really pushing to get the Henderson proposal perfect. Dedication like hers is rare." Mireia's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She started typing several responses. "I'm pregnant. We need to talk. Do you remember you have a wife?" Instead, she typed, "Okay, there's leftover pasta in the fridge." At 11 p.m., Mireia lay in their king-sized bed, listening to the city sounds filtering through their windows. Silas's side remained cold and empty. She'd fallen asleep holding her phone, hoping for another text, some sign that he remembered she existed. The front door clicked open at 12:43 a.m. She pretended to sleep as Silas moved quietly through their apartment, his phone screen casting blue light across the hallway walls. Even now, even at nearly 1 a.m., he was still scrolling. "Mireia," he whispered. "You awake?" For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. Maybe now. Maybe he'd sit on the bed's edge, put his phone aside, and actually see her. But when she didn't respond immediately, she heard him sigh softly and retreat to the guest bathroom. The shower ran for 20 minutes, longer than his usual efficient routine. When he finally slipped into bed, he smelled like expensive soap and something else. Something floral and young, perfume that wasn't hers. Mireia's eyes flew open in the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs. She lay perfectly still, counting his breaths until they deepened into sleep while questions burned through her mind like acid. How long? How far? How could I have been so blind? At 3 a.m., she crept out of bed and into the bathroom, where she quietly emptied her stomach of the small dinner she'd managed to keep down. Morning sickness, the pregnancy books called it, though it seemed to strike at all hours. As she rinsed her mouth, Mireia caught sight of her reflection. Pale, exhausted, hair escaping from her bun in messy tendrils. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman whose world was crumbling while she tried desperately to hold the pieces together. Back in bed, she pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, adding to the list she'd started 3 days ago. Baby due approximately February. Tell Silas when he's not busy. Research pediatricians. Buy prenatal vitamins. Find out who Lennox Hayes really is. The last item made her stomach lurch with something that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. But as Silas shifted beside her, mumbling a name in his sleep that definitely wasn't hers, Mireya knew she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Something was very, very wrong with her marriage, and she was going to find out exactly what. The truth has a way of revealing itself when you're least prepared to handle it. Mireya discovered this on a Thursday morning while Silas showered, his phone carelessly abandoned on the nightstand, something that never happened. Usually it was surgically attached to his palm, but today he'd been rushing, muttering about an early meeting with the team. The device buzzed with an incoming message, and the preview lit up the lock screen. Lennox. Last night was incredible, can't stop thinking about. The words cut off, but Mireya's world tilted sideways. Her hands moved without conscious thought, muscle memory supplying Silas's passcode. Their wedding anniversary, a date that apparently meant more to her than to him. The full message thread opened like a wound. Lennox. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about what you said about leaving her. When are we going to stop pretending this is just work? Silas. Soon. She's been so clingy lately, always wanting to talk. You're like a breath of fresh air. Lennox. I know exactly how to make you forget all about home. That little black dress worked, didn't it? Silas. You have no idea what you do to me. At 20, you have more passion than she's had in years. Mireya's vision blurred as she scrolled up, finding weeks of messages that painted a picture she'd been too trusting to see. Late-night texts that weren't about work, photos that had nothing to do with quarterly reports, plans that excluded any mention of the wife waiting at home. Her favorite message, if she could call the thing that shattered her heart favorite, was from 3 nights ago. Silas. Told him I was working late again. She actually believed me. Sometimes I think she's completely clueless. Lennox. Poor thing. But that's what happens when you let yourself go. I saw your wedding photos on your desk. She used to be pretty. What happened? Silas. Kids, careers, life. She's always tired, always anxious about something. You make me feel young again. The bathroom door handle turned, and Mireya's training as an architect, someone who solved problems under pressure, kicked in. She placed the phone exactly where she'd found it, arranged herself in the same position, and somehow managed to look like she'd been sleeping when Silas emerged in a cloud of steam. Morning, babe, he said, grabbing his phone without a glance in her direction. His thumb moved across the screen immediately, and she watched his face light up with whatever response Lennox had sent. Good morning, Mireya whispered, her voice barely functioning. He was already moving toward his closet, selecting one of his slim-fit suits, the charcoal gray one that made his eyes look even bluer. I'll be late tonight. Big presentation for the Henderson account. Kelly's been putting in serious hours on this one. Kelly. Even now, saying her name brought that particular smile to his face, the one Mireya hadn't seen directed at her in months. Of course she has, Mireya managed. If Silas heard the break in her voice, he didn't show it. He was too busy checking his reflection, adjusting his tie with the same meticulous care he'd once reserved for their date nights. After he left, with a distracted kiss that barely grazed her cheek, Mireya sat in their bed and finally let herself fall apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, the sound of dreams dying in real time. She was 8 weeks pregnant with the child of a man who thought she was clueless and clingy, who compared her unfavorably to a 20-year-old who wore little black dresses and sent fire emojis, who laughed about her trust with the woman who was actively destroying their marriage. The morning sickness hit with vengeful force, sending her scrambling to the bathroom where she retched until her stomach was empty and her throat raw. When she finally looked up, her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, hollow-eyed, pale, defeated. But as she stared at herself, something shifted. The devastation was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it, something harder was crystallizing. Anger. Pure, clean anger that burned away the fog of confusion and self-doubt. Silas thought she was clueless. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Mireya walked back to the bedroom and opened her laptop, her fingers moving with mechanical precision across the keyboard. A quick search revealed that Lennox Hayes had graduated from UW just 3 months ago with a business degree. Her LinkedIn showed the internship at Silas's company as her first and only professional experience. 20 years old, barely out of college, and already confident enough to destroy a 7-year marriage for sport. Mireya's phone buzzed with a text from her half-sister Tatum in Portland. "How are you doing, sis? Feel like we haven't talked in forever." For the first time in weeks, Mireya smiled. Not the forced, everything-is-fine smile she'd been wearing like armor, but something real and decisive. She typed back, "I need to ask you something. Would it be okay if I came to visit for a while? I need some space to think." Tatum's response came immediately. "Of course. What's going on?" Mireya stared at the question, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. "How did you summarize the complete implosion of your life in a text message?" "I'll explain when I get there." "Is next week too soon?" "Never too soon for family. Drive safe." Mireya closed the phone, her decision crystallizing with startling clarity. She wouldn't confront Silas. She wouldn't give him the chance to lie, to minimize, to make her feel crazy for believing what her own eyes had shown her. Instead, she was going to disappear. Let him explain her absence to his precious Lennox. Let him figure out how to manage his life without the clueless wife who had been holding everything together while he played house with an intern young enough to be his daughter. For the first time in months, Mireya felt something like peace settle over her. She had 8 months to figure out how to raise a child alone, and she was going to use every single day of that time to become the woman she should have been all along. The woman who didn't wait around for men to remember she existed. The art of disappearing, Mireya discovered, required more planning than designing a skyscraper. Over the next 5 days, she moved through her life like a ghost preparing for departure. Each morning, she kissed Silas goodbye as he rushed off to his meetings with Lennox, then methodically dismantled the life they'd built together. She started with the practical things. A call to her bank to open a personal account that Silas couldn't access. Another call to redirect her direct deposit from their joint account to the new one. Her hands shook as she signed the paperwork, but her voice remained steady. "Just some financial reorganization," she told the banker, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who seemed to understand without being told. Next came her clients. Mireya crafted careful emails explaining that she was taking an extended leave of absence for personal reasons, referring her ongoing projects to colleagues she trusted. The Morrison project, the one Silas and Lennox had supposedly closed together, would continue without her input. The irony wasn't lost on her. The hardest part was deciding what to take. 7 years of marriage compressed into 2 suitcases and a carry-on bag. She folded her clothes methodically, organizing by color and season, a nervous habit that brought unexpected comfort. The professional blazers, the comfortable cardigans, the maternity clothes she'd secretly ordered online, still with tags attached. Her iPad went into the laptop bag, along with the chargers and the stylus she used for architectural sketches. The pregnancy books she'd been hiding under her side of the bed, the prenatal vitamins she'd started taking in secret, the wedding album stayed behind. So did the framed photos from their honeymoon in Napa, their anniversary dinners, their carefully curated life that looked perfect from the outside but had been rotting from within. On Tuesday evening, as Silas showered after another late night at the office, Mireya sat at their kitchen counter composing the letter she'd leave behind. She wrote 17 different versions before settling on something simple. "Silas, I know about Lennox. I know about everything. I need time to think about our future, and I can't do that here. Don't look for me. When I'm ready to talk, I'll contact you. Mireya." She sealed it in an envelope and placed it on his nightstand, where he'd find it after she was already gone. Wednesday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Seattle weather that matched her mood perfectly. Silas left at his usual time, phone already pressed to his ear as he discussed quarterly projections with someone who definitely wasn't Lennox. At least not yet. The day was young. Mireya waited 30 minutes after his departure, then called an Uber. As the driver loaded her bags into the trunk, she took one last look at their building. 43 floors of glass and steel, with their condo on the 38th floor. She'd loved the views when they first moved in, the way the city stretched out below them like a promise of endless possibility. Now it just looked cold. The drive to Portland took 4 hours with one stop for gas and crackers to settle her stomach. Mireya spent most of the journey staring out the passenger window, watching the landscape change from urban sprawl to rolling hills to the familiar neighborhoods of her half-sister's world. Tatum lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in the Selwood district, with a small front yard and a garden that showed signs of careful attention. The house was painted a cheerful yellow with white trim, the kind of place that belonged in a family movie about second chances. "Jesus, Mireya," Tatum said, opening the front door before the Uber had even pulled away. "You look like hell." It was exactly what Mireya needed to hear. Honest, direct, without the careful tiptoeing that everyone else seemed to think she required. Tatum had always been blunt, a trait that had annoyed Mireya in their younger years, but now felt like a lifeline. "I feel like hell," Mireya admitted, accepting her sister's fierce hug. Tatum was everything Mireya wasn't. Curvy where Mireya was angular, dark where Mireya was pale, effortlessly casual in jeans and a flannel shirt that somehow looked intentionally stylish. At 38, she radiated the confidence of a woman who had survived her own disasters and emerged stronger. "Come on," Tatum said, grabbing one of the suitcases. "Coffee first, then we'll unpack your drama." The house smelled like vanilla candles and the remnants of breakfast. Toast and real butter, not the organic spread Silas preferred. Tatum's kitchen was small but warm, with mismatched dishes and a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better decades. "Fair warning," Tatum said, pouring coffee into mugs that didn't match. "I have exactly zero patience for men who don't appreciate what they have. So if you're here to figure out how to win back some asshole who doesn't deserve you, we're going to have problems." Mireya wrapped her hands around the warm mug, inhaling the rich scent that would have made her nauseous a week ago, but now seemed to calm her stomach. "I'm not here to win anyone back." "Good. Now tell me what that husband of yours did to make you pack up and run." So Mireya told her. Everything. The emotional distance that had grown between them like a cancer. The late nights and weak excuses. The Instagram account and the devastating text messages. The pregnancy she'd discovered alone and was now facing the same way. Tatum listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When Mireya finished, her sister was quiet for a long moment. 20 years old, Tatum finally said. "Christ, men really are idiots, aren't they? The worst part is how stupid I feel," Mireya confessed. "All the signs were there. I just chose not to see them." "Honey, that's not stupid. That's human. When you love someone, you want to believe the best about them." Tatum's voice softened. "But now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Mireya could answer, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Silas's name flashed on the screen, followed immediately by a text notification. Then another call. Another text. "He found your note," Tatum observed. Mireya stared at the phone, watching it light up with increasingly frantic attempts at contact. She could imagine Silas in their bedroom, holding the letter with shaking hands, probably calling her from the same spot where he'd been texting Lennox about leaving her. The irony was almost beautiful. "Let it ring," Tatum advised. "Trust me. Panic looks good on cheating husbands." So Mireya did. She sat in her sister's kitchen, drinking coffee that tasted like safety, and watching her phone explode with evidence of Silas's growing desperation, while somewhere in Seattle, a man was finally learning what it felt like to be ignored. Silas James Evans had built his career on controlling variables, managing outcomes, and never being caught off guard. Standing in his empty bedroom at 7:47 p.m., holding Mireya's letter with trembling hands, he realized that all his corporate strategies were useless when your wife vanished into thin air. "I know about Lennox. I know about everything." The words hit him like a physical blow. His legs gave out and he sank onto the bed they'd shared for 7 years, the letter fluttering to the floor as his fingers went numb. How long had she known? His mind raced backward through the past few weeks, searching for signs he'd missed. Had Mireya seemed different? Distant? He tried to remember their recent conversations, but came up empty. When was the last time he'd actually looked at her? Really looked instead of scrolling through his phone? The Apple Watch on his wrist buzzed with a text from Lennox. "Can't wait for dinner tomorrow night. That new place downtown is supposed to be amazing." Silas stared at the message, his stomach churning. Less than an hour ago, he'd been excited about their plans. Now the thought of Lennox's eager smile made him feel sick. He called Mireya's number with shaking fingers. Straight to voicemail. "Mireya, please. We need to talk about this. Just call me back, okay? Whatever you think you know, we can work through it. I love you." The words felt hollow, even as he spoke them. When was the last time he'd told her he loved her and meant it? When was the last time he'd said it when he wasn't distracted? When his phone wasn't in his other hand? When his mind wasn't already moving on to the next meeting, the next project, the next message from Lennox? He tried calling again and again, Each time her voicemail picked up after one ring, the universal sign that his calls were being actively declined. Panic clawed at his chest as he began searching their condo systematically. Her side of the closet was half empty, with obvious gaps where her favorite clothes had been. The bathroom counter, usually cluttered with her skincare products and the vitamins she'd recently started taking, was bare, except for his things. In the kitchen, he opened the junk drawer where they kept important documents. Her passport was gone. So were her birth certificate and social security card. This wasn't an angry storm out. This was a planned disappearance. Silas's hands shook as he scrolled through his phone, looking for anyone who might know where she'd gone. He realized with sinking horror that he couldn't remember the last time Mireya had mentioned friends or family. When had he stopped listening to her talk about her day? When had her life become background noise to his ambitions? He found Tatum's number in Mireya's old contacts. Her half-sister in Portland. They'd only met twice, at their wedding and at Christmas 3 years ago. Silas remembered her as blunt and unimpressed by his corporate success, the kind of woman who called him fancy boy and meant it as an insult. The call went straight to voicemail. Tatum, this is Silas. Mireya's, we had a misunderstanding, and I think she might have come to see you. Please have her call me. We need to work this out. Misunderstanding. Even now he was minimizing what he'd done, using corporate speak to describe the destruction of his marriage. At 11 p.m., after 6 more unanswered calls and increasingly desperate voicemails, Silas found himself standing in front of his home office computer, staring at the Instagram messages that had started everything. The conversation thread with Lennox was still open on his phone. Her latest message, sent 20 minutes ago, showed a photo of herself in workout clothes at the gym. Getting strong for my man, miss you already. 3 months ago, that photo would have made him smile. Now it made him want to throw his phone against the wall. What the hell had he been thinking? Lennox was beautiful, yes. Young and energetic and full of the kind of ambition that reminded him of his younger self. But she was also, what? A fantasy. A distraction from the reality of marriage and responsibility and the quiet, steady love that Mireya had been offering him for 7 years, while he chased promotions and stock options. His phone rang. Hope flared in his chest until he saw the caller ID. Lennox. Hey, gorgeous. Her voice purred through the speaker. I know you said we shouldn't talk tonight, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. Want to come over? I made that pasta you like. Silas closed his eyes, hearing her words as if for the first time. The calculated sweetness. The way she always seemed to know exactly what to say to make him feel desired, important, young. Had any of it been real? I can't, he said quietly. Something's come up. Work stuff? You know I don't mind waiting. I could help you relax when you're done. Lennox, I need to ask you something. His voice was steadier than his hands. Why are you interested in me? Really? A pause, then a laugh that sounded different, less practiced, more calculating. What kind of question is that? I care about you, Silas. You're brilliant and successful and I'm married. Barely, she said, and the dismissive tone made his stomach lurch. You said yourself that your wife doesn't understand you, that she's holding you back from your potential. Had he said that? The word sounded foreign and cruel, but the memory was there, fuzzy with wine and the intoxication of feeling desired by someone who made him feel important. I have to go, he said. Silas? What's wrong? You're acting weird. He hung up without answering, and immediately blocked her number. It was a small gesture, probably meaningless, but it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in months. The condo felt enormous and empty around him. Every corner held memories of Mireya, her laptop bag by the door, the coffee mug she forgot to wash that morning, the architectural sketches scattered across her desk in their spare room. He walked into that room now, seeing it clearly for the first time in months. The walls were covered with her work, beautiful, intricate drawings of homes and buildings that prioritized comfort over flash, substance over style. In the corner, he noticed a stack of books she'd been reading. What to Expect When You're Expecting, The First 40 Days, Pregnancy for Dummies. The books hit him like a physical blow. He sank into her desk chair, staring at the evidence of a secret she'd been carrying alone while he played house with a woman young enough to be his daughter. Mireya was pregnant. His wife was carrying their child. And instead of supporting her, he'd been planning to leave her for an intern who saw him as a stepping stone to her own ambitions. Silas put his head in his hands and, for the first time since his father's funeral 15 years ago, he began to cry. Deep, ugly sobs that echoed through their empty home. mourning not just the loss of his wife, but the loss of the man he'd thought himself to be. Outside, Seattle glittered with its usual indifferent beauty, while inside their perfect condo, a man finally understood what he'd thrown away. The question was, would understanding be enough to get it back? 3 weeks in Portland had taught Mireya that healing wasn't linear, pretty, or predictable. Some mornings she woke up in Tatum's guest room feeling strong and clear-headed, ready to sketch new architectural designs on her iPad while sipping herbal tea that actually stayed down. Other days she couldn't get out of bed until noon, her body racked with morning sickness that felt more like grief than pregnancy symptoms. "It's normal," Tatum assured her on one of the harder days, bringing toast cut into small triangles, the only food Mireya could reliably keep down. "Your whole world just exploded. Give yourself permission to be a mess for a while." Tatum's house had become a sanctuary of mismatched furniture and honest conversations. Unlike the sterile perfection of the Seattle condo, every surface here told a story. Coffee rings on the wooden table, a throw pillow with a small tear that had been mended with careful stitches, children's artwork on the refrigerator from the kids Tatum watched after school to make ends meet. "I was married too," Tatum had told her during their first heart-to-heart, both of them curled up on the couch with mugs of coffee. "Marcus cheated with his secretary. Such a cliché I almost laughed." "Almost. What happened?" "I fought for him. Went to counseling, tried to be the cool wife who understood that men make mistakes. Forgave him when he promised it would never happen again." Tatum's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands tightened around her mug. "Then I found out about secretary number 2 and 3. Turns out some people don't want to be saved from themselves." Mireya had absorbed this story like a warning, filing it away with all the other hard truths she was learning about marriage, betrayal, and the difference between love and habit. Her phone had finally stopped buzzing with Silas's desperate attempts at contact. 47 missed calls in the first week, then 23 in the second, then nothing. The silence was somehow worse than the constant notifications had been. "He gave up fast," she'd told Tatum yesterday while they painted the guest room a soft yellow, gender-neutral and hopeful. "Or he got distracted by his little girlfriend again," Tatum had replied, rolling more paint onto her brush with unnecessary force. "Men like him don't stay single long. They need someone to manage their emotions for them." The comment had stung because Mireya recognized the truth in it. How many of Silas's moods had she carefully managed over the years? How many times had she adjusted her own needs to accommodate his stress, his schedule, his priorities? Now, sitting in a coffee shop in the Hawthorne district, Mireya was learning to manage only her own emotions. She'd discovered a daily routine that worked. Breakfast, if her stomach allowed, a walk around the neighborhood, and 2 hours of architectural sketching at this particular cafe where the baristas knew her order, herbal tea and a blueberry muffin, and didn't try to make small talk. Her sketches had changed since leaving Seattle. Gone were the sleek, modern designs her firm favored. Instead, she found herself drawing homes with wide porches and breakfast nooks, spaces designed for families who actually spent time together, houses with character and warmth, the kind of places where children could leave toy trucks in the hallway without someone complaining about the aesthetic. "Excuse me, are you an architect?" Mireya looked up to find a woman about her age standing beside the table, pointing at the sketch spread across the surface. The woman had kind brown eyes and wore paint-splattered jeans that suggested she was an artist of some kind. "I am," Mireya replied carefully. She wasn't used to strangers initiating conversation, especially about her work. "I'm Indy Morrison. I run a nonprofit that builds affordable housing for single mothers." The woman gestured toward Mireya's sketch, a modest 2-bedroom house with an open floor plan and lots of natural light. "That design is exactly what we need. Would you be interested in hearing about a project?" For the first time in months, Mireya felt something stir in her chest that wasn't anxiety or nausea. Interest, professional excitement, purpose. "Tell me more." Indy slid into the opposite chair, her enthusiasm infectious as she described the housing project. 30 small homes for women who were starting over, designed to be both affordable and beautiful. "Most affordable housing is ugly," Indy explained. "Like being poor means you don't deserve to live somewhere that feeds your soul." The conversation lasted 2 hours. By the end, Mireya had filled 3 pages with preliminary sketches and had agreed to meet with the project team next week. Walking home through Tatum's neighborhood, Mireya realized she was smiling, really smiling for the first time since finding those text messages. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach where a small bump was just beginning to show beneath her loose sweaters. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "Mommy might have found something good." The house smelled like dinner when she walked in. something with garlic and herbs that made her stomach growl instead of revolt. Tatum was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove while dancing slightly to music playing from her phone. "Good day?" Tatum asked, not turning around. "Actually, yes." Mireya settled at the kitchen table, pulling out her iPad to show her sister the sketches. "I might have found a job. A real one, not just something to pay bills." Tatum examined the drawings with the careful attention she gave everything important. "These are beautiful, Mireya. Really beautiful. When's the last time your work made you feel this excited?" Mireya thought about it. In Seattle, architecture had become about deadlines and client demands and making partner at the firm. When had she stopped thinking about the people who would actually live in the spaces she designed? "I can't remember," she admitted. "Then maybe this isn't just about running away from Silas," Tatum said gently. "Maybe it's about running toward something better." That night, Mireya lay in bed listening to Portland's quieter nighttime sounds, so different from Seattle's urban symphony. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent for the first time in weeks. No desperate calls from Silas. No frantic text messages promising to change. The silence should have been peaceful, but instead it made her wonder, had he really given up that easily? Or had he simply found comfort elsewhere, the way he had throughout their marriage? She pushed the thought away and focused instead on the day's successes. The baby seemed calmer today, settling into a rhythm that didn't involve constant nausea. The housing project offered the possibility of meaningful work. Tatum's spare room was beginning to feel like home rather than a hiding place. For the first time since discovering Silas's betrayal, Mireya could imagine a future that didn't revolve around fixing what he had broken. A future where she was the architect of her own happiness, designing a life that prioritized substance over appearances, authenticity over perfection. It was a radical concept for a woman who had spent 7 years trying to be the wife her husband wanted, instead of the person she actually was. But as she drifted off to sleep, one hand resting on her growing belly, Mireya thought she might finally be ready to find out who that person could be. Lennox Marie Hayes had always been exceptionally good at reading people and telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. It was a skill that had gotten her through college on scholarships and into an internship at one of Seattle's most prestigious consulting firms. But standing in Silas's office on a Tuesday morning, watching him avoid eye contact while he delivered what was clearly a rehearsed speech, she realized her calculations had been off. "The internship program is being restructured," Silas said, his fingers drumming that nervous pattern on his desk that had become more pronounced over the past month. "We're moving in a different direction, focusing on candidates with more specialized experience." Lennox adjusted her black blazer, the one that had gotten such appreciative looks from him just weeks ago, and smiled with the practiced sweetness that usually melted his resolve. "Silas, if this is about your wife, we can work around that. I understand married men need to be discreet." For the first time in the conversation, he looked directly at her. What she saw in his blue eyes wasn't desire or guilt or even anger. It was something worse. Indifference. "This isn't about my wife," he said quietly. "This is about professionalism, about the fact that I made a serious error in judgment that could have damaged both our careers." Lennox felt the first flutter of panic in her chest. She'd been so careful, so strategic in her approach. Silas was supposed to be her ticket to bigger things. Introductions to investors, recommendations for full-time positions, maybe even partnership opportunities down the line. She'd invested 3 months in this relationship, and she wasn't about to let it slip away because he was having a middle-aged crisis of conscience. "You don't mean that," she said, moving closer to his desk. "I know you feel something real for me. You said I made you feel young again, remember? That your wife didn't understand your ambition like I do." Silas winced at his own words being repeated back to him. "I was wrong to say those things. About everything." "Was the sex wrong too?" Lennox asked bluntly, abandoning subtlety for shock value. "Because you seemed pretty happy about it at the time." The color drained from Silas's face. "Keep your voice down." "Or what? You'll fire me?" She laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "I have screenshots of every text you sent me, Silas. Every late-night message about leaving your wife. Every photo you asked for. Every promise you made about introducing me to your network." Now she had his attention. The nervous drumming stopped, and his expression shifted to something she recognized from their business meetings. Calculating and cold. "Are you threatening me, Lennox?" "I'm protecting myself," she replied. "I didn't pursue you, remember? You were the one who started flirting during those late meetings. You were the one who suggested drinks after work. You were the one who said your marriage was over anyway." It was true, mostly. She had encouraged him, certainly, but Silas had been the one to cross the line first. The wedding ring he still wore was proof enough of his duplicity. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want what you promised me. A full-time position, not just here but with your connections. You said you'd introduce me to the Morrison account executives, remember? That you'd recommend me for the Henderson project team." Silas was quiet for a long moment, and Lennox could see him weighing his options. She knew enough about corporate politics to understand that their affair, if exposed, would damage him far more than it would damage her. She was young, ambitious, and could claim she'd been taken advantage of by an older married superior. He was the one with everything to lose. "Fine," he said eventually. "I'll make some calls. But after that, we're done. Completely done." Lennox smiled, but it was a different kind of smile now. Sharper, more honest. "I'll take that deal." As she turned to leave, Silas called her name. "Lennox, what we had, did any of it mean anything to you?" She paused at the door, considering the question. Silas wasn't a bad man exactly. He was attractive, successful, and had been genuinely kind to her in the beginning. Under different circumstances, she might have enjoyed his company without ulterior motives. But these weren't different circumstances. It meant job security, she said simply. "Thanks for the recommendation letters." After she left, Silas sat alone in his office, staring at the framed photo on his desk. A picture from his wedding day, back when he and Mireya had looked at each other like they held the secrets to happiness. He'd turned the photo face down weeks ago, unable to meet Mireya's eyes even in a photograph. Now he turned it back up, studying his wife's face. She'd been radiant that day, green eyes sparkling with joy and trust. The kind of trust he'd spent 7 years earning and 3 months destroying. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope your wife enjoys the screenshots I'm about to send her. L." The blood in Silas's veins turned to ice water. He'd given Lennox what she wanted, but apparently that wasn't enough. She wanted to destroy what was left of his marriage too, either out of spite or as insurance against future problems. He tried calling the number back, but it went straight to a disconnected message. When he checked social media, Lennox's accounts had vanished. Instagram, LinkedIn, even her company email had been deactivated. She'd gotten what she came for and disappeared like smoke. Silas grabbed his car keys with shaking hands. He had to get to Portland before Lennox's messages reached Mireya. He had to explain, to apologize, to somehow convince his wife that their marriage was worth saving despite the evidence that suggested otherwise. But as he raced through Seattle traffic, breaking every speed limit between his office and the interstate, Silas couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late, that the woman he'd fallen for had been a mirage from the beginning, and now the desert was reclaiming everything he'd thought was real. Behind him, in the office building he was fleeing, Lennox Hayes cleaned out her desk with efficient movements, already composing the LinkedIn post that would frame her departure as a strategic career move rather than the calculated con it had actually been. She'd learned early that in a world run by men who confused desire with love, a young woman with the right combination of beauty and ruthlessness could write her own ticket. Silas had been easy, easier than most. Married men always were. They had so much more to lose. Mireya was sketching the kitchen layout for the affordable housing project when her phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. The message preview showed only the beginning. "Thought you should see what your husband really thinks." Her pencil froze mid-stroke. For 6 weeks she'd lived in blissful silence, her phone free from Silas's desperate attempts at reconciliation. She'd begun to believe that maybe he'd finally accepted her decision. Maybe he'd moved on with Lennox and left her to rebuild in peace. The screenshot that followed shattered that illusion. Silas. Mireya's been so needy lately, always wanting to connect and have deep conversations. Sometimes I think she's desperate to keep me interested. Lennox. Poor baby. Good thing you have me to remind you what passion looks like, Silas. She's gained weight too. Keep saying she's just stressed, but I remember when she used to take care of herself. Mireya's vision blurred as more screenshots loaded, each one a fresh knife wound. Messages about her boring friends, her predictable routines, her clinging need for emotional intimacy. Screenshots of photos Silas had sent Lennox, pictures of their bedroom, their kitchen, even their wedding album with mocking commentary. Silas, look at this one from our honeymoon. She was actually pretty back then. What happened? Lennox, life happened, baby, but you don't have to settle for less than you deserve. The final screenshot was time-stamped just 2 days ago. Lennox, Hope your wife enjoys reading these. Consider it my farewell gift to your marriage." Mireya dropped the phone like it had burned her. The coffee shop around her seemed to spin and tilt, the normal sounds of conversation and clinking mugs fading to white noise. She pressed her hand to her stomach, now visibly rounded beneath her loose sweater, and tried to breathe through the nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. He'd discussed their intimacy with his lover, shared photos of their private spaces, mocked her body, her personality, her very existence while planning to abandon her for someone who saw their marriage as entertainment. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The barista who'd served her tea every morning for weeks was standing beside her table, concern creasing his young face. Mireya managed to nod, though she felt anything but all right. "I'm fine. Just need some air." She gathered her things with shaking hands and walked outside, where Portland's October chill hit her like a slap. The tree-lined street that had become familiar and comforting now felt foreign, as if Lennox's messages had poisoned even this sanctuary. Her phone rang. Tatum. "Hey, you need to come home right now." Her sister's voice was tight with urgency. "Your husband is here." "What?" Mireya's knees nearly buckled. "How did he?" "I don't know, but he's pacing around my front yard like a crazy person and the neighbors are starting to stare. He says he needs to talk to you about some messages." The screenshots. Somehow Silas knew that Lennox had sent them. Mireya closed her eyes, trying to summon the strength she'd been building over the past 6 weeks, the confidence that had grown from meaningful work, honest conversations with Tatum, and the quiet pride of surviving on her own. "I'll be right there." The walk home took 12 minutes, but Mireya used every second to armor herself against whatever manipulation Silas might attempt. He'd had 6 weeks to reach out honestly, to take responsibility for his choices. Instead, he'd only come running when his former lover threatened to expose him further. She could see him before she turned onto Tatum's street, a tall figure in an expensive suit, pacing beside a black sedan that looked ridiculously out of place in the modest neighborhood. Even from a distance, she could see the frantic energy in his movements, the way his hands gestured as he spoke rapidly into his phone. As she approached, Silas spotted her and immediately ended his call. For a moment, they stared at each other across the small front yard, 7 years of marriage reduced to the space between two people who had become strangers. "Mireya." Her name escaped him like a prayer. "Thank God you're here. I can explain everything." "Can you?" She stopped just out of arm's reach, noting how he looked older than when she'd left, thinner. There were dark circles under his blue eyes, and his usually perfect hair showed signs of being repeatedly run through with anxious fingers. "The messages Lennox sent you, she's lying. About half of it, anyway. She twisted things, took conversations out of context." "Which half?" Mireya's voice was steadier than she felt. "The half where you called me needy and boring? Or the half where you shared pictures of our bedroom with your lover?" Silas winced as if she'd struck him. "I was angry, confused. I said things I didn't mean because I was trying to convince myself that what I was doing was justified." "You were trying to convince yourself? For 3 months?" Mireya felt something hard and bright crystallizing in her chest. Not pain this time, but clarity. "How long did it take you to convince yourself to send her pictures of our wedding album, Silas? How many days of careful thought went into mocking our marriage vows with a 20-year-old intern?" "She manipulated me," he said desperately. "You have to understand, she was using me from the beginning. For job connections, for advancement. None of it was real. But our marriage was real," Mireya said quietly. "I was real, and you threw it away for someone who was using you. What does that say about how little you valued what we had?" Silas stepped closer and she could see tears gathering in his eyes. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you in ways that, God, Mireya, I can't even sleep anymore. I keep thinking about you being pregnant and alone and I—" "Stop." The word came out sharp enough to cut. "You don't get to use my pregnancy as an excuse to feel sorry for yourself. That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it?" Mireya's hand moved protectively to her belly. "For 7 years I tried to be the wife you wanted. I managed your moods, organized your life, pretended not to notice when you stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an inconvenience. And the moment I needed you to be a partner instead of a project to manage, you found someone else." "I want to come home," Silas said, his voice breaking. "I want to fix this." "Home to what?" Mireya asked. "To the condo where you brought another woman's energy into our bedroom? To the life where I spend my time wondering if you're telling me the truth or just saying what you think I want to hear?" Tatum's front door opened, and her sister emerged with a coffee mug in her hands, clearly ready to intervene if necessary. She caught Mireya's eye and nodded, a silent message of support and solidarity. I love you, Silas said desperately. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I love you. Mireya looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had confused love with possession, partnership with convenience. A man who had only realized what he was losing when someone else threatened to take credit for destroying it. I loved you too, she said quietly. But love isn't enough to fix what you broke. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. She turned toward Tatum's house where warm light spilled from the windows and where she'd learned that home wasn't a place you shared with someone who diminished you. Mireya, wait. Silas's voice was raw with panic. The baby? She paused without turning around. The baby will be fine. We'll both be fine. But I want to be involved. I want to be a father. Then be one, she said simply. But you can't be my husband anymore. As she walked up the path to Tatum's front door, Mireya felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the fragile, temporary quiet of avoidance, but the deep, lasting peace that came from finally telling the truth. 3 months later, Mireya stood in the conference room of Morrison & Associates, her architectural firm's biggest competitor, presenting the final designs for the affordable housing project that would change everything. Her pregnancy was now impossible to hide, a beautiful, obvious curve beneath her navy blue maternity blazer that she wore like armor. Across the polished table sat 5 executives, including James Morrison himself, and in the corner, taking notes with barely contained excitement, was Indy Morrison, James's daughter and the non-profit director who had first approached Mireya in that Portland coffee shop. The modular design allows for maximum efficiency while maintaining individual character, Mireya explained, her voice steady and confident. Each unit can be customized to the family's needs while keeping construction costs within budget. Her iPad displayed the digital renderings she'd perfected over sleepless nights, fueled by herbal tea and determination. These weren't just houses. They were homes designed with love, featuring details that honored the dignity of the women who would live there. The numbers are impressive, said Morrison Sr., adjusting his reading glasses. But I have to ask, why should Morrison & Associates take on a project that frankly won't make us much money? Mireya had expected this question, because sometimes the most valuable projects aren't measured in profit margins. They're measured in lives changed, in communities built, in being able to look at your body of work and know you made the world a little bit better. The room fell silent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline stretched out like a promise, and somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, her old life continued without her. There's something else, Indy added, sliding a tablet across the table to her father. Mireya's former firm, Patterson & Associates, submitted a competing proposal. I think you should see who their lead architect is. Morrison Sr. frowned as he read the document. Silas Evans? Isn't he in consulting, not architecture? He transferred to their design division 6 weeks ago, Indy explained. Apparently his consulting career took a hit after some personal complications. His proposal copies several elements from Mireya's original concepts. Mireya's hand tightened around her stylus, but her expression remained calm. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared for it even. Silas was desperate to rebuild his career, and stealing her ideas seemed like the fastest path back to relevance. Show me, Morrison said quietly. The competing proposal appeared on the conference room's large screen, and Mireya recognized her own architectural DNA in every line. The open floor plan she'd pioneered, the natural light optimization techniques she'd developed, even the specific materials she'd recommended for durability and cost-effectiveness. But where her design felt warm and human, Silas's version was cold and corporate. He'd taken her heart and turned it into a machine. Well, Morrison Sr. said dryly, that's certainly familiar. There's more, Indy continued, and Mireya realized her new friend had been busy. Silas Evans was recently involved in a workplace scandal involving an intern. The woman in question, Lennox Hayes, has been making some interesting claims about his professional ethics. The tablet passed around the table again, and Mireya watched the executives' faces change as they read whatever Indy had discovered. She hadn't asked for details, didn't want to know how far Lennox's vindictiveness had reached, but judging by the expressions around the table, it was enough. Ms. Mitchell, Morrison Sr. said finally, your proposal is approved. We'll start construction next month. The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations, but Mireya barely heard the words. She'd done it, against every odd, carrying her child alone, rebuilding her career from scratch. She'd actually done it. As the executives filed out, Indy lingered behind with her father. "There's something else you should know," she told Mireya. "Patterson and Associates fired Silas Evans this morning. Apparently the Lennox Hayes situation exploded into a lawsuit. Sexual harassment, misuse of company resources, breach of professional conduct. His career in Seattle is effectively over." Mireya absorbed this information without satisfaction or vindication. She felt only a distant sadness for the man who had once shared her dreams and had destroyed himself, trying to recapture his youth. "And Lennox?" she found herself asking. "Blacklisted," Morrison Sr. said bluntly. Her attempt to leverage one affair into multiple opportunities backfired spectacularly. Word travels fast in this industry, especially about young professionals who weaponize personal relationships. 3 hours later, Mireya sat in Tatum's kitchen, celebrating with sparkling apple cider and the kind of takeout Chinese food that would have horrified Silas's refined palate. Her sister raised her glass in a toast. "To my brilliant sister, who turned a cheating husband into career gold." "To second chances," Mireya corrected, touching her glass to Tatum's, "and to knowing when the first chance is over." Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about your big win. Congratulations. You always were the talented one in our marriage." Mireya read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations belonged in the past, and Silas Evans was now firmly part of her history rather than her future. That evening, as Portland's autumn rain drummed against the windows, Mireya assembled a crib in what had become her permanent bedroom. Each piece clicked into place with satisfying precision, much like the new life she was building. Her phone rang, a FaceTime call from an unknown number. When she answered, a familiar face appeared on the screen. Dr. Amalfi from the prenatal clinic, calling with the results of her latest ultrasound. "Everything looks perfect, Mireya," the doctor said warmly. "Your daughter is developing beautifully. Are you ready to hear her stats?" Daughter. The word hit Mireya like sunlight breaking through clouds. She was having a daughter, a little girl who would grow up knowing that women could rebuild themselves when necessary. That strength came from within, and that the right choice wasn't always the easy choice. "I'm ready," Mireya said, one hand resting on her belly where her daughter grew strong and determined, just like her mother. Outside, Seattle glittered in the distance, but inside Tatum's yellow house, the future was being born one careful decision at a time, and for the first time in months, Mireya knew with absolute certainty that she and her daughter were going to be more than fine. They were going to be extraordinary. 1 year later, the first thing visitors noticed about Mireya's new office wasn't the prestigious downtown Portland address or the wall of architectural awards she'd earned in just 12 months. It was the corner where a sleek glass desk met a colorful play area, complete with building blocks, picture books, and a baby monitor that crackled softly with the sounds of afternoon nap time. Mireya Elizabeth Mitchell, she'd legally dropped the Evans surname 6 months ago, was reviewing blueprints for her third affordable housing project when the monitor stirred to life with familiar babbling sounds. "Mama, mama, mama," came the cheerful voice of 8-month-old Luna Grace Mitchell, who had inherited her mother's green eyes and stubborn determination, but had somehow managed to skip the anxiety gene entirely. "Someone's awake from her nap," Indy Morrison observed from across the desk where they'd been discussing the expansion of their partnership. Morrison and Associates had created an entire division dedicated to socially conscious architecture, with Mireya as its director. "Right on schedule," Mireya smiled, saving her work before heading to the adjoining room that served as Luna's temporary nursery during workdays. The sight that greeted her never failed to take her breath away. Luna sitting up in her portable crib, chubby arms reaching toward the window where afternoon sunlight streamed through, babbling enthusiastically at the dust motes dancing in the golden beams. "Hello, beautiful girl," Mireya murmured, lifting her daughter into her arms. Luna immediately grabbed for her mother's earrings, architectural-inspired pieces that Tatum had commissioned from a local artist for Mireya's birthday. "Mama," Luna announced proudly, as if she'd just solved the world's most complex equation. "That's right, sweet pea. Mama's here." Through the office windows, Portland spread out below them in all its quirky, creative glory. Mireya had never imagined that leaving Seattle would lead to this. A thriving practice, meaningful work, and the kind of life that felt authentic rather than performed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tatum. "Dinner at 6? I'm making Luna's favorite sweet potato puree and that salmon you actually like." Mireya typed back, "Perfect. We'll bring dessert. The we came naturally now. For the first few months after Luna's birth, Mireia had felt the phantom weight of missing partnership, moments when she automatically looked around for someone to share Luna's first smile, her first laugh, her first successful grab for a toy. But gradually she'd realized that she and Luna were a complete team, not a broken family missing a piece, but a whole family perfectly calibrated for their own unique rhythm. "Ms. Mitchell?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock is here." Mireia glanced at her calendar and felt her stomach flutter. Not with anxiety this time, but with anticipation. James Morrison had scheduled what he called a significant conversation about her future with the company. "Send him in," she replied, settling Luna in her bouncy seat with a selection of soft blocks that looked suspiciously like miniature architectural models. Morrison entered with his characteristic blend of gruff warmth and business acumen, but today he was carrying a leather portfolio that suggested something more formal than their usual project discussions. "Mireia," he said, taking the chair across from her desk while Luna babbled a greeting in his direction. "I'll cut to the chase. The board has been reviewing your performance metrics." For a split second, the old anxiety tried to surface, the familiar fear of not being enough, of failing to meet expectations. But Mireia pushed it aside. She knew her worth now, could quantify it in lives changed and communities built. "The numbers speak for themselves," she said simply. "They do indeed." Morrison opened the portfolio, revealing contracts and architectural plans. 3 successful projects completed ahead of schedule and under budget. A waiting list of nonprofit organizations requesting your designs. National recognition from the American Institute of Architects for Innovation in Socially Conscious Construction. Luna chose that moment to knock over her tower of blocks, clapping delightedly at the destruction she'd caused. Both adults paused to appreciate her accomplishment. "And," Morrison continued with a slight smile, "the remarkable ability to balance groundbreaking professional achievement with motherhood. Which brings me to my proposal." He slid a contract across the desk, thicker than any document Mireia had seen since her divorce papers. "Full partnership in Morrison & Associates, with your own division focused on humanitarian architecture, complete creative control, profit sharing, and a childcare policy that accommodates the reality of working parents." Mireia stared at the contract, her mind racing to catch up with this new reality. Partner. At 33, after rebuilding her entire life from scratch, she was being offered everything she'd dreamed of during those lonely nights in Seattle when Silas was working late. "The salary is competitive," Morrison added, "but more importantly, this partnership comes with something your previous firm never offered. Respect for the whole person you are, not just the professional mask you wear." "Mr. Morrison," Mireia said carefully, "why me? Why this offer?" "Because you've proven that great architecture isn't just about designing beautiful buildings. It's about understanding that the spaces we create shape the lives lived within them." He gestured toward Luna, who was now attempting to eat a foam building block. "And because anyone who can single-handedly revolutionize affordable housing while raising a baby clearly has superhuman organizational skills." Mireia laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and joyful. "Can I have the weekend to think about it?" "Take all the time you need. Though I should mention that Indy is already designing your new business cards." After Morrison left, Mireia sat in her office holding Luna while reading through the partnership agreement. The terms were generous, the creative freedom unprecedented, and the financial security would ensure Luna's future in ways Mireia had never dared imagine. But more than any of that, the offer represented something invaluable. Validation that the path she'd chosen, the difficult, uncertain path of rebuilding rather than reconciling, had led somewhere extraordinary. Her phone rang. For just a moment her heart jumped with the old fear that it might be Silas, though he'd stopped trying to contact her months ago. Instead, the caller ID showed Tatum's number. "Hey," Mireia answered, balancing the phone against her shoulder while Luna grabbed for her pen. "So?" Tatum said without preamble. "I just heard through the nonprofit grapevine that someone got offered a partnership today. News travels fast in Portland. Are you going to take it?" Mireia looked around her office, at the architectural models lining the shelves, the thank you letters from families who now lived in homes she'd designed, the photo of Luna's first help with a blueprint, mostly involving drool and enthusiastic grabbing. "Yeah," she said, surprise coloring her voice as she realized the decision had already been made. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good. Luna needs to see her mama conquering the world." That evening, as Mireya sat in Tatum's garden watching Luna discover the fascinating properties of grass while explaining her new partnership offer, she felt something she'd never experienced during her marriage: complete alignment between who she was and the life she was living. The sun set over Portland in shades of gold and pink, painting the sky like a canvas designed specifically for this moment. Luna babbled contentedly in her lap, occasionally reaching for dandelions with the focused determination of a future architect. "You did it, sis," Tatum said quietly. "You really did it." Mireya looked down at her daughter, who was methodically examining a blade of grass with the serious expression of a scientist making groundbreaking discoveries. "We did it," she corrected. "All of us." Somewhere in Seattle, her old life continued without her. Silas had moved back to his hometown in Ohio, starting over in a smaller firm with a greatly diminished reputation. Lennox had left the architectural world entirely, her dreams of corporate success derailed by her own manipulations. But here, in this garden filled with vegetables Tatum grew herself and flowers Luna tried to taste, the future was being written in choices made with love rather than fear. Mireya Mitchell, architect, mother, partner, survivor, was home. 5 years later, Luna Mitchell Morrison stood in the completed playground of the Riverside housing community, directing a group of children in an elaborate construction project involving sandbox sand and serious engineering principles she'd absorbed from spending countless hours in her mother's office. "The foundation has to be strong," she explained to a boy named Marcus, channeling both her mother's technical expertise and Aunt Tatum's no-nonsense delivery. "Otherwise, the whole castle falls down." Mireya watched from a nearby bench, her second daughter, 3-year-old Sage, napping against her shoulder after an exhausting morning of helping with the community center's ribbon-cutting ceremony. The Riverside project had been her masterpiece: 150 units of affordable housing that felt like a real neighborhood, complete with community gardens, a daycare center, and common spaces designed to foster the kind of connections that transformed houses into homes. "She's got your eye for detail," Indy observed, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the community center's cafe, another of Mireya's design innovations. "And Tatum's confidence," Mireya replied, watching Luna demonstrate proper sand-tamping technique with the authority of someone who'd spent her entire life around blueprints and building materials. Mireya's phone buzzed with a text from her newest client, a women's shelter in Vancouver that wanted to commission a residential complex. The work never stopped, but she'd learned to build her life around the work, rather than the other way around. At 38, Mireya had become one of the most sought-after architects on the West Coast, specializing in what architectural magazines called empathetic design, spaces that honored the humanity of their inhabitants above all else. She'd spoken at conferences, won international awards, and most importantly, had created homes for over 3,000 families who deserved beauty in their lives. But her greatest achievement was simpler. She'd learned to trust her own judgment, to choose herself, to build a life that felt authentic rather than perfect. As the afternoon light began to fade over the community she'd designed, Mireya gathered her daughters and headed home to the house she'd bought in Portland's Alberta district, a modest craftsman with a big yard and a studio where she sketched by moonlight after the girls were asleep. "Mama?" Luna asked as they walked toward the car, her small hand sticky with sandbox sand and ice cream. "When I grow up, can I build houses too?" Mireya smiled, remembering the little girl who used to organize colored pencils by gradient and dream of spaces where families could flourish. "You can build anything you want, sweetheart. Anything at all." And watching her daughter's face light up with possibility, Mireya knew with absolute certainty that some endings were really just beginnings in disguise. The community Mireya built wasn't just made of wood and steel. It was made of second chances, single mothers finding their strength and the radical belief that everyone deserves a home that honors their dignity. Would you have the courage to walk away from everything familiar to build something true? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.